The light on my console turned red, and I knew something was wrong before anyone in the room said a single word. I had spent 11 years reading that chamber. 11 years sitting in the smallest chair, at the back of the Great Hall, watching beings far older than my entire planet decide the fate of worlds, while I waited for permission to speak. I had learned to read that room the way a sailor reads the sea. And right then the sea was about to turn. My name is Daniel Carter. I was the human liaison to the Galactic Council, which was a polite way of saying I was the one they allowed inside the building so they could claim that humans had a voice. We did not have a vote. We did not have weight. We had a chair, and a small light that turned green when we were allowed to talk and red when we were not. That night the light stayed red, and a message slid across it in the cold gray letters of the Council's own language. It said that the survey of the human colony at Kepler's Reach had entered its final stage. I read it twice. My chest went tight. Kepler's Reach was not a research station or a mining outpost. It was a home. 2 million people lived there. Children went to school there. People grew food, fell in love, argued about nothing, and watched two suns rise over the hills every morning. And the Council had been surveying it for months, hanging a quiet ship in its sky, refusing to tell me why. I had filed complaints, 11 of them. Each one came back stamped with the same response. The matter is under Council authority. Your concern is noted. Please remain calm. I stood up. My chair scraped against the polished floor, and the sound carried across the whole chamber. 9 sets of eyes turned toward me. The concordance of 9 they called themselves. 9 species who had ruled the galaxy for longer than humans had been able to write. They measured the worth of a species by 3 things: how long it lived, how strong its mind was, and how mature it had become. By all 3 measures, humanity sat at the very bottom of every list. Counselor Veyron, I said, keeping my voice steady. I would like to know what final stage means. The being at the center of the high table turned to face me. Veyron was tall and pale, with eyes that did not blink, and a voice that always sounded like it was speaking to a child. Liaison Carter, it said. You were not given speaking rights. My people live on that world. Your provisional people live on a provisional world, Veyron answered. Both arrangements exist at the pleasure of this council. The survey concerns the long-term value of the region. That is all you need to understand. The long-term value of the region. I held those words in my head and turned them over. They did not sound like the words of a friend. A second voice spoke. This one belonged to a smaller figure near the edge of the table, a being I knew only by the name Sori. Sori was a Vor, a low-ranked engineer assigned to maintain the chamber's systems. The Vor were not one of the 9. They were a servant species, allowed to work but never to speak, and yet Sori spoke now quietly, almost like a slip of the tongue. The survey teams have already begun the appraisal, Sori said. The room went cold. Veyron's eyes snapped toward the Vor, and Sori lowered its head at once, as though it had touched something it was never meant to touch. The engineer misspeaks, Veyron said smoothly. It does not understand the terms it repeats. 2 guards stepped forward and led Sori out. As it passed my chair, it did something strange. It looked at me, just for a moment, and in that look I saw something I had never seen on any face in that chamber. I saw fear, and I saw pity, and I understood that the pity was for me. I sat back down because there was nothing else I could do. The light on my console stayed red. The council moved on to other matters, voices flowing over me like water over a stone, and I sat there with one word burning a hole in my mind. Appraisal. You appraise a thing before you sell it, before you take it, before you decide it is worth more in pieces than whole. That night I did not sleep. I sat in my small office on the council station, a room barely large enough to turn around in, and I pulled every file I had access to. It was not much. Humanity had been given the lowest level of clearance, the kind that let you read public notices and old trade reports and nothing that mattered. But I had spent 11 years in that building, and over 11 years even a man at the bottom of the table learns where a few of the cracks are. I found the survey orders for Kepler's Reach. Most of it was locked behind walls I could not climb. But the cover page was open, and on it, in plain council text, was a category code. I had seen that code before, years ago, attached to a different world. A world that no longer appeared on any map. I ran the code through the public archive. It came back with a single line of meaning, translated into something close to my own language. Candidate for reclamation. I stared at it for a long time. The word reclamation has a soft sound to it. It sounds gentle, like cleaning a room or taking back something that was loaned. But I had been in that building too long to be fooled by soft sounds. I had watched the council use gentle words for hard things my whole career. I knew. The way you know a storm is coming when the air goes still, exactly what they meant. They did not see Kepler's Reach as a colony. They saw it as a thing to be taken back. They saw 2 million people the way a farmer sees a field at the end of the season. I should have felt rage. Instead, I felt a strange, terrible calm. Because for 11 years I had told myself a story. The story was that if we humans were patient enough, polite enough, useful enough, the council would one day see us as equals. I had repeated that story to my own people back home. Be patient, earn it, prove we belong. And they had believed me, because I believed it too. Now I understood that the story had never been true. We were never going to be invited to the table. We had only ever been on the menu. I sent a message home that night, not through the official channel, which the council read, but through an old human science relay that they had stopped watching years ago because they thought it was broken. We had let them think it was broken. It was one of the few clever things we had ever managed to do under their eyes. The message was short. I told the people back home what I had found. I told them to listen closely to anything coming out of Kepler's reach. And I told them, for the first time in 11 years, to stop trusting the council's words and start trusting their own eyes. Then I sat in the dark and waited for morning, and I thought about Sori's face and the fear in it and the pity. We had spent more than a decade asking these beings for a seat at their table. We had folded ourselves small to fit the chair they gave us. We had thanked them for scraps and called it progress. And not one of them, in all that time, had ever stopped to wonder what a species might do if it finally realized the kindness was a lie. I did not know yet what we would do, but I knew the wondering was over. The patience was over. Something inside me had gone quiet and hard, and I could feel that same quietness spreading across the relay lines, all the way home, into 2 million hearts that did not yet know they were being measured for the end. The light on my console was still red when the sun came up over the station's curved horizon. I looked at it for a long moment. Then I reached out and switched the whole console off, and for the first time in 11 years, the silence in that room belonged to me. By the time the next council session began, I was already gone. The transmission from Kepler's reach went quiet 3 days later. It did not happen all at once. First, the long-range messages slowed. Then the colony's main relay started sending nothing but a steady, empty tone, the kind a machine makes when no one is left to speak into it. I was halfway across council space by then, riding a small human courier ship I had no permission to take, and I listened to that tone for 6 straight hours with my hands locked on the arm of my seat. I kept telling myself it was interference, a solar storm, a broken relay, anything but the truth. I had spent my whole career inventing comforting explanations for ugly things, and old habits do not die just because you want them to. Then the last message came through. It was weak, almost buried in the static, and it was not from the colony's official channel. It came from a child's personal device, the kind a parent gives a kid so they can call home from school. The voice belonged to a girl. She could not have been more than 9 years old. She said her name was Lily. She said the sky had gone wrong, that it had turned the color of metal, and that her mother had told her to hide and stay quiet and call for help on the special line. "Is anybody there?" she asked. "Please. Is anybody listening?" I was listening. And I could not answer her, because by the time the message reached my ship, hours had already passed, and there was nothing on the other end of it anymore. There was only the empty tone. I have heard a great many sounds in my life. None of them ever did to me what that little voice did. It reached into my chest, and it took something out, and it did not give it back. I sat in that cramped ship, far from home, far from help, and I made myself listen to her question again and again until I had it memorized. Is anybody listening? I owed her that much. I owed her the promise that someone, somewhere, had finally heard. The council made its announcement 2 days later. I watched it on the courier's small screen. Councillor Veyron stood before the high table and informed the galaxy that the human colony at Kepler's reach had suffered a natural depopulation event, a cascade failure of its life systems, Veyron said. A tragedy, but a known risk for young species that expanded faster than their wisdom. The council offered its formal regret. The matter was closed. The vote to close it was 9 in favor, none against. Natural depopulation. I had heard the council use soft words for hard things many times. This was the softest word for the hardest thing I had ever known. 2 million people. A girl named Lily. All of it folded up neatly into 2 clean syllables and filed away. I should have broken. Part of me expected to. I waited for the grief to crash over me like a wave and pull me under. But it did not come, not in the way I expected. What came instead was something quieter and far more dangerous. It was a kind of stillness. The stillness of a man who has finally run out of reasons to lie to himself. I changed course. Instead of running for the deep human worlds where I might have hidden, I turned the courier toward a place I was not supposed to know about. a small gray station orbiting a dead moon at the edge of council space. It was a maintenance depot, the sort of place the council never thought about, staffed entirely by servant species who kept the machinery of empire running while the masters slept. It was where the Vor lived. It was where I hoped to find Sori. I almost did not make it. A council patrol challenged my ship as I crossed into the depot space, demanding my clearance and my purpose. I gave them a liaison code that had probably already been cancelled, and I held my breath while they checked it. For one long minute I was sure they would order me to stop. Then, to my surprise, they waved me through. A human courier was not worth a patrol's attention. We had spent 11 years teaching them that we did not matter. Now, for the first time, that lesson was working in my favor. I found Sori in the lower levels of the depot, in a workshop full of half-repaired machines and the smell of hot metal. The Vorverse looked smaller out of the great chamber, hunched over a workbench, its long fingers moving over a piece of equipment I did not recognize. When it saw me, it froze. Then it set down its tools and looked at me with those same eyes I remembered, the ones full of fear and pity. "You should not be here," Sori said. "If they find a human in this place, it will go badly for both of us." "They told the galaxy it was natural," I said. My voice did not sound like my own. "A failure of the life systems, a tragedy." Sori was quiet for a moment, then it said very softly, "It was not natural. I know. I want you to tell me the truth. All of it. I am done with soft words." The Vor studied me for a long time, weighing something I could not see. Then it did a thing I had never known one of them to do. It locked the workshop door, and it began to talk. What Sori told me that night took the floor out from under everything I thought I understood. The Council, it said, did not simply rule the galaxy. It fed on it. The Concordance of Nine had stopped truly building anything thousands of years ago. They did not invent. They did not grow. They inherited. Their great ships, their weapons, their endless wealth, all of it had been made by earlier hands long since gone, and the Nine had spent the centuries since simply spending what they had been given. And when their stores ran low, they did not make more. They took. They had a name for it, the appraisal. A survey ship would arrive over a world judged to belong to a young or weak species, one with no vote and no power. The ship would measure the world's worth in raw material and living matter. And then, when the appraisal was complete, the Council would quietly empty the world of everything that gave it value, and add the total to its own dwindling stores. Afterward, they would announce a natural disaster, offer their regret, and close the matter with a clean vote. "How many?" I asked. The word came out of me like a stone. Sori's hands trembled. 83 worlds, it said. Kepler's reach was the 83rd. There is a record. I keep the systems that store it. I was never meant to read it, but a being learns to read the things it is forced to carry. 83 worlds. 83 times a species like mine had been measured and emptied and explained away. And every other young species in the galaxy had watched it happen and learned the same lesson we had spent 11 years learning. Stay small. Stay quiet. Be useful. Do not anger the ones who hold the table. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "You could be punished. You said so yourself." Sori looked down at its hands. "Because I have carried that record for a very long time," it said. "And I have wanted for a very long time to give it to someone who would not simply weep and look away. I watched your face in the chamber, Carter. When the others heard the word reclamation, they felt nothing. You went pale. I thought perhaps this one will not look away." I did not look away. I took the record. Sori loaded it onto a small data core, 83 worlds and all the dates and all the soft lies, and pressed it into my hand. It felt heavier than anything I had ever held. "There is more," Sori said. "The thing the Council fears most is not strength. It is many of you understanding the truth at the same time. They keep the young species apart. They keep them afraid. They keep them believing that the Nine cannot be challenged. But it is a story, Carter. The Nine have not fought a real war in longer than your species has existed. Their power is real, but their courage is old and untested. No one has ever made them afraid. They do not even remember what it feels like." I left the depot before dawn. Sori would not come with me. "Not yet," it said. There were others among the servant species who needed warning, who needed to know that someone finally had the record and meant to use it. But it gave me a way to reach it, a quiet channel buried inside the Council's own systems. And it told me that when the time came, it would not be the only servant ready to choose a different master. I flew home with 83 worlds in my pocket, and a girl's voice in my head. The journey gave me too much time to think. I kept circling back to the same dark question. What could humanity possibly do against a power like the Council? We were the youngest species at the table. We lived short lives. We had no great inherited fleet. By every measure the Council valued, we were nothing. But somewhere over those long, quiet days, The question began to change shape in my mind, because I started to wonder whether the council had been measuring the wrong things all along. They valued long lives, but a short life learns fast because it has to. They valued strong minds in the way they meant it, the slow, deep thought of beings who could afford to spend a century on a single idea. But we humans thought in a different way. We were quick. We were restless. We could not sit still. We argued and failed and tried again 100 times in the span it took one of the 9 to make a single, careful decision. They saw that as weakness. They called us children, always rushing, never patient. I began to think that our rushing might be the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. When I finally reached human space, I did not find the planet I expected. I had carried the news ahead of me on the old science relay, and I had braced myself for what it might do. I had feared chaos, panic, people screaming in the streets or sinking into despair, or turning on each other the way frightened crowds sometimes do. That is not what I found. I found something far stranger and far more frightening to anyone who might have stood against us. I found a species gone quiet, not the quiet of fear, the quiet of work. Every screen I passed in the spaceport showed not panic but plans. Engineers gathered in halls that had been concert venues a week before. Old rivalries between nations that had argued for centuries had simply stopped, the way an argument stops when the house catches fire. Every shipyard in the system was lit and running. People I had never met stopped me in the corridors, recognized me, and said the same thing. They did not ask whether we would answer. They asked when. I had brought home the worst news in our history. And my people had taken that news, and the grief inside it, and they had folded the grief down into a single hard point and aimed it. A woman met me at the dock. Her name was Grace Holloway, and before all this she had been a systems engineer. The kind of person who spent her life pulling broken machines apart to see how they worked. Now, somehow, she had become something close to the heart of everything happening on the planet, because in a crisis people do not follow the loudest voice. They follow the one who knows what to do next. Grace knew what to do next. "You brought the record," she said. It was not a question. I handed her the data core. She held it the way you hold something sacred and terrible at once. "There is a piece of their technology," she said. "Something one of our deep survey teams pulled out of a dead council wreck 2 years ago. We never understood it. It just sat in a lab, doing nothing, because no one could make sense of it." She looked up at me. "After your message came through, we stopped trying to understand it slowly. We tore it open. We are going to know everything inside it within weeks." "Weeks," I said. "The council takes decades to approve a single change to a single ship." "I know," Grace said. And for the first time since I had come home, I saw something almost like a smile on a human face. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who has just realized that the thing the whole galaxy feared was not nearly as strong as it pretended to be. That is exactly the point. Standing there, in the noise and the light and the terrible focused calm of my own people, I finally understood what Sori had been trying to tell me. The council had spent its entire existence measuring species by how slowly and grandly they could think. They had never once measured how fast a species could change when it had a reason to. They had called us children, and no one had ever stopped to think about how dangerous a child becomes the moment it discovers the adults have been lying to it all along. Grace took me to the lab where the dead council device had been torn open. I am not an engineer. Most of what I saw on the long tables meant nothing to me. But I understood the feeling in that room, and the feeling was electric. Dozens of people moved between the tables in a kind of controlled storm, calling numbers to one another, scrawling notes, swapping pieces of metal and light from hand to hand. No one was waiting for permission. No one was filing a request and waiting 11 sessions for a reply. They simply tried a thing, watched it fail, and tried the next thing, faster than I could follow. "Tell me what you have learned," I said. Grace led me to the largest table, where the heart of the council device sat exposed. The council's power comes from these," she said, pointing at a lattice of fine silver threads. "Energy cores. Every one of their great ships runs on them. They are beautiful. They are far beyond anything we have ever made on our own." She paused. "And the council has no idea how they work." I stared at her. "What do you mean, no idea?" "I mean they did not make these," she said. "Whoever did has been gone for thousands of years. The 9 inherited the cores and have been using them ever since. The way a man might use a fire he does not know how to light. They can run them. They can replace a worn one with a spare from their stores. But they cannot build a new one, and they cannot truly repair a broken one. When a core fails, they simply throw the ship away." She tapped the silver lattice. "Their entire empire is a great pile of borrowed fire, slowly burning down. That is why they take worlds, not for greed alone. They are running out, and they do not know how to make more. I felt the ground shift beneath everything I thought I knew. The Council was not a rising power. It was a fading one, holding the galaxy still through fear because it could no longer hold it through strength. And us? I asked, can we make more? Grace was quiet for a moment. Then she picked up a small object from the table and held it out to me. It looked rough and unfinished next to the elegant council lattice, like a child's drawing next to a master's painting. But it glowed with the same steady light. We could not copy it, she said. It is too far beyond us. So we did not copy it. We did the human thing. We found a different road to the same place. This is ours. We do not fully understand theirs. But we understand this because we built it from nothing in 19 days. 19 days. I held the rough little core in my hand and I felt its warmth, and I understood that I was holding the thing that was going to change everything. Not because it was better than the council's. It was not. But because we could make it, and they could not make theirs. And in a long war, the side that can replace what it loses always outlasts the side that cannot. Over the following weeks, the planet became a single great engine. Sori's channel stayed open, and through it came more than warnings. Other servant species, hearing whispers that the 83 worlds had finally found a voice, began to send what they could. Maps of council space, patrol schedules, the locations of the great storage depots where the 9 kept their dwindling supply of borrowed fire. None of them dared act openly, but all of them were watching and waiting to see whether the rumor was true, whether someone at last meant to stand. I spent those weeks doing the one thing I knew how to do. I talked. I went from hall to hall, from shipyard to shipyard, telling people the truth, all of it, the 83 worlds and the borrowed fire and the girl named Lily. I did not soften any of it. I had spent 11 years softening hard things, and I was finished. I told them that we were small and young and outmatched in every way the council valued. And then I told them that the council had been valuing the wrong things, and that I had come home to a planet that proved it. The fleet that came together in those weeks was not large. I will not pretend it was. Against the full strength of the 9, it was a handful of ships. But every one of them ran on fire we had made ourselves, and every one of them was crewed by people who had heard a child ask whether anybody was listening, and decided that the answer would be yes. We were nearly ready when the summons came. It arrived on every human channel at once, which meant the council had finally decided we were worth their attention. Counselor Veyron's image filled every screen on the planet. It spoke to us the way it had always spoken to me, slowly, gently, as if to a child who had misbehaved. The council, Veyron said, had become aware that the human species was engaged in unauthorized military preparation. This was a serious breach of provisional standing. To resolve the matter peacefully, the council summoned humanity's leaders to appear before the high table at Tarsus Gate, the seat of the concordance itself, to explain themselves and submit to inspection. A single escort would be permitted. Any larger presence would be treated as a hostile act. It was a trap dressed as mercy. They expected us to come small and afraid, the way we always had, to stand in their great hall and beg for forgiveness. They were inviting the smallest seat at the table to come and apologize for daring to stand up. I watched Grace's face as the message ended. She did not look afraid. She looked, if anything, almost grateful, the way a person looks when an enemy makes exactly the mistake you were hoping for. They want us to come to Tarsus Gate, she said. They want us in their own hall where they feel safest. She turned to me. Carter, they have just told us where to find every member of the 9, gathered in one place, certain that no one would ever dare. I felt the stillness inside me settle into something final. We had spent over a decade asking to be allowed near that table. Now they were ordering us to come, and they had not thought, not for one moment, to ask what we would do once we arrived. We came to Tarsus Gate with a fleet, and the council was not ready for it. They had expected a single escort and a delegation of frightened leaders. What arrived instead was every ship we had built, burning across the dark on fire of our own making, taking up a formation in the sky above the great station that no one at the high table had ever seen humans hold before. I stood on the command deck of the lead ship beside Grace and the captain, a steady woman named Laura Bennett who had flown deep survey runs her whole life, and never once flinched. Tarsus Gate was the most beautiful and most terrible thing I had ever seen. It was less a station than a small world, a vast ring of gleaming towers built by hands long dead, hanging in space around a pale gold sun. Around it floated the great ships of the 9, each one a mountain of metal and light, any single one of them larger than our entire fleet combined. For a moment, looking at them, the old fear tried to climb back into my chest. They were so vast, we were so few. Then I remembered the borrowed fire and the fear let go. Veyron's image appeared on our deck, projected from the high table. Its unblinking eyes moved across our formation, and for the first time in 11 years I saw something cross that pale face that I could not name at first. Then I understood. It was confusion. The council had a place in its mind for every kind of being, and not one of those places fit what it was looking at. You were instructed to bring a single escort, Veyron said. This is a hostile act. You have ended any chance of mercy. Lower your weapons and surrender your ships, or this council will be forced to remove the human species from the record entirely. I stepped forward so the projection could see me. Counselor Veyron, I said. My name is Daniel Carter. You may remember me. I sat in the smallest chair at the back of your hall for 11 years and thanked you for the privilege. You have no speaking rights, liaison. I am not asking for them anymore. I held up the data core Sori had given me, and I let our systems broadcast its contents on every channel in council space at once, where every servant species and every young world and every member of the Nine could see it. 83 worlds, every date, every soft lie, the truth about Kepler's reach, and the 82 that came before it, told plainly in the council's own records. We are not here to surrender. We are here to deliver a message. You measured us wrong. You have measured everyone wrong for a very long time, and now the whole galaxy is going to learn what the bottom of your table is capable of. The council's answer was the great ships turning toward us. I watched them move, so uncertain, the way a mountain might move if a mountain could decide to crush you. They did not hurry. In all their long history they had never needed to hurry. Their size had always been enough. But size is only an advantage if the thing facing you fights the way you expect. We did not fight the way they expected. Captain Bennett gave the order, and our fleet broke apart into dozens of small, fast pieces, scattering and weaving around the great hulls like birds around a falling tree. The council ships were built to face other great ships, slow and grand, trading blows across vast distances in the stately way the Nine did everything. They had no answer for a swarm that would not hold still, that changed its shape every few seconds, that thought faster than their ancient systems could track. Grace had been right about the borrowed fire, and she had been right about something else too. The council ships were beautiful, but they were old, and they had not truly been tested in longer than humanity had existed. Their crews knew the motions of war the way you might know a dance you had, read about but never danced. We knew it the way you know a thing you have just invented in a desperate hurry, with no rules and nothing to lose. I will not pretend it was easy or quick or clean. It was none of those things. We lost ships. I watched lights wink out on our display, that I knew were full of people who had heard Lily's question and chosen to answer it. Each one took a piece of me with it. But for every ship we lost, the great hulls of the Nine took a wound they did not know how to close. When one of our fast little ships struck home against a core, the damage did not stop. The council could not repair the borrowed fire. They had thrown away that knowledge thousands of years ago. A wound that we could mend in an hour, they could only watch spread. And then, something happened that the council had never planned for, because it had spent its whole existence making sure it could never happen. The galaxy was watching. The broadcast had gone everywhere, the 83 worlds laid bare on every screen, and across council space the servant species who kept the empire running saw, all at once, the same truth at the same time. Sori had told me this was the thing the council feared most, not strength. Understanding shared in the same moment by everyone who had been kept apart and afraid. The depots went dark first. The great storage stations where the Nine kept their dwindling fire, all of them staffed by servant hands, simply stopped answering. Then the patrol routes fell silent as crews refused to move. Sori's channel lit up with voice after voice, species I had never heard of, worlds I had never known, all saying a version of the same thing. We saw. We are done being afraid. Tell us where to stand. The battle above Tarsus Gate was no longer humanity against the Nine. It had become the whole galaxy against 9 fading masters who had ruled for so long on fear that they had forgotten they had nothing else. Veyron's image flickered back onto our deck. The confusion was gone now. In its place was something I had truly never expected to see on the face of one of the Nine. It was fear, raw and total and entirely new. The fear of a being that had ruled without challenge for so long that it had forgotten the feeling even existed. This is not possible, Veyron said. Its smooth voice had cracked. You are children. You are nothing. You cannot do this. We are doing it, I said. We are doing it right now. And the only reason we can is that you never once imagined we might. I gave Captain Bennett a look and she understood. We could have pressed the attack. We had the great ships of the Nine surrounded and wounded and blind, and the whole galaxy rising behind us. We could have emptied Tarsus Gate the way they had emptied 83 worlds. For one long moment, with Lily's voice in my head and the lights of lost ships still burning behind my eyes, part of me wanted exactly that. But I had spent 11 years watching what it does to a people when they decide that some lives are worth less than others. I had seen where that road ends. It ends at the high table, with 9 fading beings explaining away 2 million people in 2 clean syllables. I would not take that road. We would not. Stand your ships down, I told Veyron, all of them now, or the galaxy you have ruled for 10,000 years will do to you exactly what you taught it to do. I leaned toward the projection, and we both know it has learned the lesson very well. The great ships of the 9 went still. One by one their fire dimmed, and the mountains that had ruled the dark for longer than my species had words for stopped moving. The high table at Tarsus Gate, which no one had ever dared approach in anger, fell silent under the ships of the youngest species at the table. It was over, not because we had crushed them, because the whole galaxy had finally seen them clearly at the same moment, and a thing that rules only through fear cannot survive being seen. I stood on the deck and looked at the silent ships and the gleaming towers and the pale gold sun, and I did not feel triumph. I felt tired and I felt grief, and I felt the weight of every light that had gone out to bring us here. But underneath all of it, very quietly, I felt one thing more. I felt heard. Somewhere a girl had asked whether anybody was listening, and the whole galaxy had just answered. The concordance of 9 did not end in a single grand moment. It ended slowly, the way old things end, by losing the one thing that had held it together. It lost its lie. In the weeks after Tarsus Gate, I expected the galaxy to break into 100 new wars. I expected the young species and the servant species, suddenly free of their fear, to turn on the 9 and on one another and tear the old order apart in a storm of payback. There was reason enough for it. 83 worlds gave a great many people a great many reasons. It did not happen. And the reason it did not happen is the part of this story I am most proud to tell. When the Masters fell, humanity held more power than any single species had held in 10,000 years. The whole galaxy had risen at our word. The fleets of the 9 were silent and wounded and ours for the taking. We had the strength, in that moment, to simply become the new council, to take the high table for ourselves and rule the way they had ruled, from the top, by fear. There were voices among my own people who wanted exactly that. After what had been done to us, who could blame them? I stood before our leaders, and I asked them to do the hardest thing of all. I asked them to put the power down. If we take the table, I said, we become them. Slower, maybe. Kinder for a while. But the road is the same road, and we have all seen where it ends. The council did not fall because it was strong and we were stronger. It fell because it forgot what it felt like to be small. I will not build a new empire that is only waiting to forget the same thing. It was not an easy argument to win. Grace stood with me, and Captain Bennett stood with me, and in the end, slowly the rest came around. Not because they stopped wanting revenge, but because they understood that revenge and a future cannot live in the same house. So we did not take the table. We broke it, and we built a new one in its place. The new council was not 9 seats. It was as many seats as there were species willing to come and sit, and every seat was equal. And the smallest and youngest world had exactly the same single vote as the oldest and the greatest. There was no provisional standing. There was no back of the room. There was no console with a light that turned red. Sori came to the new hall, no longer a servant maintaining the machinery while its masters slept, but a delegate of its own people, who had never before in their long history been allowed a voice. The first time it cast a vote, its hands shook, and I understood why. Because I had spent 11 years dreaming of a vote I was never going to get. The very first thing the new council did, before anything else, was pass a single law. It was named the Kepler Accord, after the world that had been measured and emptied and explained away. The law said, in plain words that needed no soft cover, that no species would ever again be appraised, reclaimed, or removed from the record by any power for any reason. That the worth of a people could never again be measured in raw material or living matter. That every world, no matter how young or small or weak, belonged to itself and to no one else. It passed without a single vote against it. I was in the hall when it did. I do not mind telling you that I had to look away for a moment. Sori found me afterward, in a quiet corridor away from the noise of the new hall. We stood together for a while without speaking, 2 beings from opposite ends of the old order, looking out a great window at the same pale gold sun. You could have ruled it all, Sori said at last. I have wondered since that day why you did not. You had the strength, you had the right, if anyone ever had it. Why did you put it down? I thought about how to answer. I thought about the 11 years in the smallest chair, and the word reclamation, and the empty tone, and a girl asking whether anybody was listening. I thought about all the things I could say. In the end, I said the truest thing I knew. Because I remembered what it felt like to be the smallest seat at the table, I told it. Power did not make the 9 cruel, sorry. They were powerful for a very long time before they fell. What made them cruel was forgetting. They forgot they had ever been afraid. They forgot they had ever been small. The moment you forget that, you start measuring other people, and once you start measuring people, it is only ever a matter of time before you decide some of them are worth more in pieces. I looked at it. I do not want us to forget. Putting the power down is how we remember. Sorry was quiet for a long time. Then it said simply, "Your people are very young." I agreed. "It may be," it said. "That being young is the thing that saved you." The 9 were old. They had answered every question they thought was worth asking thousands of years ago, and they stopped asking new ones. Your people had not stopped. You were still rushing, still failing, still trying the next thing. It turned its strange eyes on me. I spent my whole life believing that age was wisdom. I am no longer certain. Perhaps wisdom is only ever remembering to keep asking. I have thought about those words many times in the years since. The galaxy is not perfect now. I will not lie to you and say it is. There are still arguments in the new hall that last for days. There are still old wounds that have not healed, and may never heal. 83 worlds cannot be made whole again by any law, however just. The dead do not come back because the living finally learned better. I know this. I carry it. But no world has been appraised since Kepler's reach. No people have been measured for their parts. The servants are servants no longer. The young worlds speak with the same weight as the old ones. And when a small frightened world, somewhere on the edge of everything, sends out a signal, asking whether anybody is listening, the answer, now, is always yes. I went back to Kepler's reach once, years later. There was nothing left to find. Only the quiet hills and the 2 suns rising over them the way they had for 2 million people who were not there to see it anymore. I stood in that silence for a long time. Then I set down a small marker, and on it I wrote a single name, Lily. The girl who asked the question. The girl whose voice I could not answer in time, but whose question I have spent the rest of my life answering anyway. People sometimes ask me what happened out there. They want a simple story. They want to hear about the day humanity, the youngest and smallest species at the table, stood up against the masters of the galaxy and won. And that is true as far as it goes. But it was never really about winning, and we never really snapped the way the old stories say. We did not break in a moment of rage. What happened was quieter and stranger and far harder than that. For a very long time, we let ourselves believe a comforting lie, because the truth was too heavy to carry. And then one day the lie cost us too much, and we put it down and we picked up the truth instead, and we did not look away. That is the whole of it. They crossed a line they did not know was there, and we did not rise because we were strong. We rose because we were finally done pretending to be anything other than exactly what we are: small, young, quick, stubborn, unwilling. In the end, to let a child ask into the dark and hear nothing come back. The galaxy has been listening to us ever since, and we have done our best, every single day, to make sure we never forget how to listen in return.